Okay, so in the previous chapter, we did about the nervous system, about the different kinds of coordination, which was the nervous and the chemical coordination. We did the function of nervous system. We saw the structure of a neuron, which is a nerve cell. We understood there are three types of neurons: sensory, motor, and association neurons. We understood what is a synapse and what are neurotransmitters, right? The synapse is crossed through the neurotransmitters, which is there. So now we will study about what exactly is a nerve. Okay, a nerve is formed by a bundle of axons or nerve fibers. Bundle of axons, which you know are the nerve fibers, enclosed in a tubular medullary sheath. So they are basically many of the axons, they are bundled together to make a nerve fiber. Right? For example, let's look at that. So if you see over here, this is what kind of a structure of a nerve fiber nerve looks over here. See this one over here. So we have many of them. This is one individual. Like this, we have all of these are together. Many axons. This is one single axon. Like this, there will be many axons all coming into the sheath. When a bundle of them, okay, so we have different bundles of them, we are put into a medulla sheath here. So this is the medulla sheath. These bundle of nerve fibers or axons, they make up a nerve. Clear? Parth will do chemistry next week. We'll start from Monday probably.
I wanted to ask something.
Yes, tell me.
So the definition that you have written, how is that the definition? It should be how is it formed? How is the nerve formed?
If I ask you what is a nerve, what are you going to say?
I don't know.
You will say this only. Right? So nerve is formed by a bundle, or a nerve is a bundle, whatever. Either is formed or is a bundle, whatever. Many nerves together, they make up, many axons together, they make up a nerve. So a nerve is a bundle of axons or formed by a bundle of axons, either of the two. Right? Now this sheet that is there, it performs various roles. Right? So what does it do? Firstly, it gives us insulation so that the nerves, they don't get damaged. And also it creates an isolation. Isolation means that the messages or the impulses which are traveling through the axons, they don't get intermixed or between different fibers. So it's supposing we have the sensory nerve and we have a motor nerve. These signals should not interfere with each other, right? So this kind of a sheet, the medulla sheet, prevents as an isolation as well as insulation. Insulation is to prevent from damage, for protection. So this medulla sheet provides both insulation as well as isolation. Please copy this down. Gatik, can you hear me now? Rejoin if you cannot hear me. Let me message it to him. Please copy this down, everyone. You don't need to make the diagram. The diagram is not important. So why is this called a nerve fiber? Because there are many of the nerves stretched together. So we'll have a nerve, and then we'll have another cyton and a nerve. Together, this is a nerve fiber. This nerve fiber is enclosed together in a bundle of nerves, which are nerve fibers, which will be called the nerve, right? These further definitions, this neurolemma, the Schwann cell nucleus, etc., the myelin, all this will come in 10th. Okay, can we move ahead? There are three kinds of nerves. We have a sensory nerve, we have a motor nerve, similar to we had sensory neurons and motor neurons. And instead of association neurons, we will have a mixed nerve. Okay. So like the name suggests, sensory neurons, a sensory nerve will consist only of sensory neurons, right? So they bring impulses from the senses to our brain. So they are called, for example, the optic nerve. It is only to take the sense from our eyes to our brain. A motor neuron, on the other hand, it consists of only motor neurons. That is, it takes signals from the brain to the body organ. For example, nerves to the muscles of the eye, which will help the eye to move. Right? And mixed neurons contains both sensory and motor neurons. Sorry, a mixed nerve contains both sensory and motor neurons. Right? Example, nerve which goes to a tongue. So tongue, as you know, is a sensory organ, so it sends signal from the tongue to the brain. And again, we can even move the tongue, so we can. It's called it contains motor neurons also. So the neurons which are going to the tongue will be from a mixed nerve and not a separate sensory and a motor nerve. Please copy this down. For example, we can see a kind of easy way to understand how this works. For example, we're feeling thirsty, so we see water. What happens is our receptors in the eye, they get stimulated, which are basically a sensory organ. From the sensory neuron through the sensory nerves, it sends an impulse to the brain, right? Then the brain further sends a signal through the motor nerve neurons contained in the motor nerves to the muscle to telling us to pick up the glass and drink the water. Sensory, I've written, contains only sensory neurons, example optic nerve. Have you all understood how these both work in difference? So sensory contains from the sense organs to the brain or the central nervous system, whereas the motor neurons is from the brain to the target organ or basically the muscle. Okay, anyone still copying this? Please raise your hand if you're still copying. Okay, now let's understand about the human nervous system. The human nervous system basically has two main divisions. One is called the central nervous system, also called the CNS, and the second is called the peripheral nervous system. Which is called the PNS, right? So we just see the difference between both of them again in the form of a chart, so it becomes very easy for you to remember. The central nervous system, it consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Right? You know the brain lies protected within the skull and the spinal cord lies within the vertebral column. The peripheral nervous system, on the other hand, it consists of the nerves going, uh, arising from and going to the central nervous system. So it consists of all the nerves arising from, I'll share a diagram with you shortly, and going to the central nervous system. Right? So these nerves will be spread throughout the body. I'll just show you a diagram so you can understand easily. Just a sec. So if you look here, the central nervous system will be consisting only of the brain and the spinal cord, which is enclosed in the vertebral column, and the brain is enclosed within the cranium. Whereas from the brain, we have different kinds of nerves which go to and arise from the CNS. So this will be the peripheral nervous system. It goes throughout the body. Is this clear? Please copy this down. Done, everyone? Is anyone still copying? Okay. Now, the peripheral nervous system is further divided into two parts. The PNS is divided into somatic nervous system, and we have the autonomic nervous system. Right? What's the difference between both? Let's understand that also now. The somatic nervous system connects the CNS to the organs, muscles, and skin. Right? What does it do? It carries the motor and the sensory information both to and fro from the CNS. Okay? Whereas the autonomic nervous system is basically unconsciously and automatically involuntary. So this is an acts, we can say it acts unconsciously. We don't have any control over it. It automatically works. It controls involuntary activities of the body. Example, heart rate, the beating of the heart, dilation of blood vessels, direction, stash, constriction, which we cannot control. right? Please copy this down. Autonomic, again, there are two of them. We have a sympathetic and a parasympathetic one, which we will study next year. So in a very simple, simplified way, if you want to understand, we can just make a rough chart. I can share one with you. For example, see over here, we have the nervous system, which is divided into a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is further divided into somatic, which basically is under our control. For example, controlling the muscles, and the autonomic, which is further divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic, which we'll study this later. We don't need to include this, right? So the autonomic is unconscious. For example, the beating of the heart. If you're interested, what is it? The sympathetic nervous system is a flight or fight response system, which we control, which basically we don't control. It makes us ready for fight or flight, the adrenal part. Whereas this parasympathetic is the rest and digest kind of a system, in which we are resting and digesting our activities, our food basically, and creating energy. Okay, so that's basically the sympathetic and the parasympathetic one. Done? Are you also copying this? Should we move ahead? Anyone still copying? Please answer or raise your hand if you're still copying this. Otherwise, we will move ahead. Okay. Now let's study about the central nervous system in detail. Like we said, the central nervous system has two main parts. One is the brain, and the other is the spinal cord, which arises from the brain, right? We know central nervous system consists of the brain and to the spinal cord, which is enclosed in the vertebral column. So we are going to study about the brain right now. The brain is a highly developed organ, right? It is the main control center of the nervous system. Everything happens from the brain. It is protected by cranium or so-called the skull. You're already aware of all, right? There are three membranes which envelope the brain, which are called the meninges. And these membranes, they have a cerebrospinal fluid. It gives nourishment to the brain and also protects it from shock. Okay, please copy this down before I move further into the three different parts of the brain. So the brain is the most highly developed organ in the human body. It mainly controls it's the main control center of the nervous system. It is protected by the cranium and the skull. It has three membranes or layers, which is called the meninges. And between each of these layers, there is a fluid called the cerebrospinal fluid between them. It nourishes the brain and also protects us from shock. Is anyone still copying? Please raise your hand. Anyone still copying this? This is not there in the book. This is extra information I've given you. Please copy this down. This is part of the syllabus, but not there in the book. Okay. But the brain has three main parts. One, first is the cerebrum. Second is the cerebellum. And the third is the medulla oblongata. Please copy this. I'll show you a diagram of the brain also. In fact, it's much more highly complex than this, but this is the main part. So the largest part of the brain is the cerebrum. Then below that we have an area called the cerebellum and the brainstem or the medulla oblongata. Brainstem actually and the medulla oblongata are slightly different. The medulla and the oblongata are similar. The upper portion of the brainstem is called the medulla oblongata, and the brainstem itself converts into stretches into the spinal cord. If you want to see a more complex diagram, this is what the brain actually looks like. It's really more complicated than this. So we have different kinds of areas within the brain also, but the rough one which we said was the three main parts. For you, that is enough. The cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem or the medulla oblongata. This is what the different parts of the brain looks like. This is what we are talking about. Very simple and a efficient one for us, enough for us for our needs. Okay. Let's first understand the first main part, which is the cerebrum. Okay. This is the largest part of the brain. And accounts for around 2/3 of the brain. Right? The surface is highly convoluted. It has a lot of ridges. I'll show you the detailed diagram in a moment. So there are a lot of ridges and grooves present on the surface of the cerebrum. What does this do? It increases surface area to accommodate more neurons. Convoluted. Siddhant Garve, convoluted. Convoluted. Right? Now, the cerebrum has a deep longitudinal furrow or a bridge that divides it into two parts. The left and right cerebral hemispheres. Okay, so the entire ridge, the entire hemisphere, we have two basic hemispheres, left and right, which is by the deep longitudinal furrow or a bridge between the cerebrum itself. Okay, now the outer ridge, I'll show you a diagram shortly. Let's write down the notes first. The outer region of each hemisphere contains the cell body. The cell bodies of the neurons. If you remember the cell body, that is the cyton. So the cyton is contained in the outer side of the cerebrums, right? and appears gray in color since the cytons are gray. This is an important point. That is why it is also called gray matter. And the inner region contains the whitish axons, so is called white matter. Please copy this down. I need to go further. Anyone still copying? Please raise your hand if you're still copying this. If anyone has any doubts or any part is not clear, please feel free to ask me. One point you can note, even though the scientists have still not actually confirmed this, they say that the right hemisphere, it's well adopted, but it's under dispute also now. It controls the left part of the body, and the left hemisphere, it controls the right part of the body. That's what they say. So, Dan Garve, are you done?
To the last line.
Okay. Please make notes. They're very important to remember stuff. I could have just read from the book. Now, what does the cerebrum do? So, if you look at the functions of the cerebrum, it controls all our voluntary activities. All our voluntary activities arise from the cerebrum itself. It controls our intelligence. When we think something, whatever we remember, this is all in the cerebrum. Our consciousness, our awareness of ourselves and our world around us, willpower, right? Memorizing, all these activities, right? Interpreting pain, even though pain itself, the impulse originates in our sensory organs, we need to interpret it, isn't it? We need to understand that we are feeling pain. So this site of interpreting pain is again the cerebrum. Pain, touch, etc. All our senses are interpreted in the cerebrum, right? Our speech, emotions, all this get affected by the cerebrum. Basically, these four activities are the main important one. Voluntary activities, intelligence, consciousness, and willpower. Now, if you look at the brain, this is what the gray matter looks like, and the white matter. So these are the ridges. This is the convoluted surface, the ridges, right? This is the left half and the right half of the brain, left hemisphere and right hemisphere by the furrow. This is the gray matter, the outer cell body, and the inner side is the white matter or the axons or the myelins, right? This is the left hemisphere, this is the right hemisphere. Any doubts, anyone? That's it about the cerebrum. Tomorrow's class we will continue and understand cerebellum and medulla oblongata, and we'll also see about the spinal cord and the peripheral nervous system. Please copy this. That's it for today. If you have finished copying this, you can leave. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Bye, everyone. You can leave once you're
Bye,
finished.
sir.
Bye, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye. Rajvi, are you done?
Yes, sir. Last thing I have to write.
Okay. Where did you go wrong in today's papers?
I was. There were these two questions that in geography that I didn't know, that I didn't know, and the others, yeah, I
Okay.
just guessed.
Okay, no problem.
Done, sir.
Okay. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.